Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Rolka. Thank you for checking out my video. This is the second video in our high note series. This is about singing over the break, singing high notes, getting out from the chest voice range, singing higher. In the first video, I went through a lot of the ins and outs of what it is to sing high notes. I am not going to rehash that in each of these videos. I am instead going to show you some exercises in a moment here. I'm going to show you some exercises, what to look for, what to listen for, and the idea that this is a practice. I don't have a tip, and I am sorry if this disappoints. I do not have a tip that is going to take you from going from I can't sing a high note, or it's always out of tune, or it's always squeezy, or fill in the blank with the numerous problems that it entails, to now I sound like insert name of your favorite artist who sings high notes. That's not how this works. It's a practice. What I can show you are exercises that if you practice them, they will help you understand what is happening when you're trying to sing a high note, and they will help you to smooth out the transition from one voice to the next, or one range to the next if you prefer, or one register to the next. Those all get used synonymously in these practices, although I tend to stick with register. One register to the next. You can smooth it out, and you can make it so that they sound the same, so that they are consistent in their phonation. The casual listener will have no idea that you are changing registers. This is a series. There are several videos that are coming up. I'm going to do more and more exercises, so I would encourage you to subscribe if you haven't already. If you have, thank you very much for that. And for those of you that support me on Patreon, I really appreciate the support. Thank you so much for that. It really does keep this train a-rolling. Now, let's move to the piano here because this is important. You should be able to see the piano now. And here I am. This is middle C. For most tenors and baritones, things start to get tricky when we head above that, because we are getting into this area of change. We're getting near to the break. Most tenors and baritones will feel their break somewhere in this area. Generally speaking, if it's beyond that, you may be pushing too far. You're squeezing out those chest voice notes too high into your range. And the most balanced point of transition is going to be in this general area. The most balanced point of transition is important because it will mean that you will get the most consistent sound from one register to the next. If you try to push and push and push and push and then change registers, well, that's when the vocal folds tend to separate and you get that airy falsetto kind of tone production. Now, the cool thing about this is that mezzos and sopranos will feel a transition in this area too. Now, for tenors and baritones, this is the secondo passaggio, the second transition point. For mezzos and sopranos, this is their primo passaggio. But frequently, that registration event for mezzos and sopranos feels an awful lot like the secondo passaggio feels to tenors and baritones, and it gets sung that way too, where as they go above it, they'll frequently get a little squeezy, or it'll get that airy falsetto tone production, that separation of the vocal fold. So we can all do these exercises in roughly the same range. Now, there's more to all the voices, moving higher up. And altos, I've specifically not mentioned you because your registration events are generally here and here. But altos, you can sing along with us as well, because doing a bit of the affectation that you're going to hear me use will help you with your registration events. And we'll move up there too as we get further into the video. Now, when we sing this, the first note that I sing is going to sound very different from all the rest of the notes. And that is absolutely intentional. Listen to it for a second here. You You can hear how hollow, but you can hear there's a difference. You. Now, you can describe that in a number of different ways. You might say, that sounds hooty. It sounds hollow. It is extremely important that it sound that way. If it sounds like anything else, that's not right. In other words, if you sang it and it were really squeezy, you, that's not right. If it was airy, you, that too is not correct. None of those two examples that I just did, 2 or 3 examples that I just did there, none of those will result in a smooth transition over the break. None of them will result in a smooth transition over, for tenors and baritones, your secondo passaggio, or for mezzos and sopranos, your primo passaggio. When you do it like this, you are going from an elongated vocal fold that is adducted, where the vocal folds are quote-unquote closed. That's the sort of nomenclature of the day, if you like. I avoid that because they're not closed and shut. They're just adducted very fully along their axis, their longitudinal axis. So they're really making good contact. That's what makes it sound consistent. You. It's not airy. You. It's not squeezy. You. And yes, the squeeze and the air are extreme examples, but I want you to hear the difference here, because you're going to have to try it on your own and listen and be able to hear those differences. Now, when you make that hollow sound, you're getting an elongated vocal fold that is adducted, and the larynx is kept in a neutral to lowered position. In other words, it's the same level as if I were talking, or it might be slightly lowered a little bit. Either of those is fine. What we don't want is that lifted larynx, which is typically what happens when you're squeezing a note out. If you're making this sound, then the larynx is almost certainly in a neutral to lowered position, but I would encourage you to use a mirror when you practice it, or lightly monitor with your hand, where your hand is just lightly hovering over the laryngeal spot, larynx position, monitoring its motion or lack thereof. It should mostly just stay put. Now, listen to the bottom 3 notes. They are not hollow, hooty, whatever word you're going to use to describe that, right? They are in my thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice, my chest voice. Now, in truth, that D natural is somewhat modified in terms of vowel, and it's slightly elongated in vocal fold coordination or configuration, because it's in my zona de passaggio. For most tenors and baritones, it will be for you as well. And we want to encourage those modifications. It's not cricothyroid dominant, it's not head voice, but it has some amount of elongation. That too will help you with the smooth transition. If I tried to make this D the same as this G, it would ultimately not sound the same. It would in fact sound different. This is one of the paradoxes and challenges with singing high notes, of which there are several, none of which are really that difficult, but you have to put them all together. It is the coordination that is the challenge, in my opinion. Now, let's try some of these together. You'll notice that this exercise skips over the area that I have identified as the likely location for the secondo passaggio for tenors and baritones, and the primo passaggio for mezzos, mezzos and sopranos. Okay, that is absolutely intentional, because the coordination of all of these elements is much more specific on the secondo passaggio. So we're going to practice accessing this elongated adducted vocal fold configuration. We're going to start with it and we're going to exit. And that's all we're going to do for a couple scales here. So with me, if you would. And you, 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 you. You. One more. You. Now let's do it again. You. 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 One more time on your own. And now, for the mezzos and sopranos, those low notes are too low. Okay, the mezzos probably got the Gs. You maybe got the F sharps, but I doubt you got the Fs. If you did, it would be primarily vocal fry. I wouldn't encourage you to try to, hammer those out. Just let them fade away if you want. The other thing we can do for our mezzo and soprano friends is do these as triads. So we can go you, and you. One more. You. And again, without me. And now, tenors and baritones can do the triads as well. However, I would wait until you are very, very solid with the technique on the 1 octave descending arpeggio. The triad requires more specificity of technique. You have to be more precise. And it may just be that it's a little too much, a little too soon. Certainly in the context of this video, that skips many, many steps. But in the interests of giving something for the sopranos and mezzos to do in its entirety, I did that there. So right on. Now, if you're having trouble doing that whole 1 octave arpeggio with the U syllable, you can start with U and switch to we for the notes that are below the secondo passaggio, below the break. So that would sound like this. U, we. The E vowel tends to be easier to narrow and easier to... It kind of helps us make sure that we're very firmly, very concretely below the secondo passaggio. You, we. Let's try it. And you, we. You, we. You, we. Let's do it again. And you, we. You, we. You, we. Try it on your own. And right. Now, I mentioned that we would go a little bit higher up so that the altos would have a chance. Altos, this B flat is above this area of your voice. If you've been singing for a while, you may have noticed there's a little bit of a tricky bit that happens around, depends on the voice, G sharp, A, sort of stuff like that. And this is the primo passaggio for you, where you're getting into the area where you're getting ready to go over the secondo passaggio. But it can be tricky. So we're going to try you, 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 you. Although I'm down an octave. So in your octave, you, 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 you. The difficulty there is that really I'm doing these two notes in my cricothyroid dominant singing voice right now. I wouldn't normally do that one there, but I have a cold. I imagine you can hear that if you've heard my videos before. At any rate, altos, that one should be cricothyroid dominant, that hollow, hooty sound. The F, D, and B flat, not so much. U, and one more time. And altos, you as well can do the you, we thing. I'll show you here. You, we, starting here. And now we start those exercises above the secondo passaggio because frequently our habits around squeezing out the high notes or having them be airy are created on ascending phrases. So if we try to do an ascending phrase and then do something different at the top, it is vastly more difficult than if we start at the top and come down. That is why this video starts and does the exercises the way it does, and why I teach it this way. I should have mentioned this at the beginning. It goes without saying that a good appoggio breath management practice will help with all of this. If you haven't started that, start now, and then that will help you with this process. You really have to have good engagement, good appoggio breath management to be able to sing high notes with any degree of consistency. Additionally, your vowel alignment in the regular range of your voice is critical to being able to make these vowels and their modifications with the precision and accuracy that is required. So keep up your vowel alignment practice in the regular range of your voice, below the break if you prefer. All right? That's, there's like 1,600 videos here on my channel, many of which, now admittedly, many of them are about singing high notes, but there's plenty of them that go over just the regular range of any given Fach, any given vocal range. So keep that practice up too. Now, I say all that to say, once you can consistently start and have the note be produced correctly in that exercise, we have to flip the direction. But what we do is we start at the top, go down, and go back up. And the goal here is to make the tonic at the octave. Let me just show you on the piano. It's just easier, right? So if we're in the key of G, this is the tonic at the octave. Okay, it's an octave above that one, octave apart. We want it to sound the same both times. So when we sing the exercise, you, 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 that G is sung the same both times. Generally speaking, the first G will be correct. That's about 90% of the time. When I'm teaching lessons on this, 90% of the time that first G is correct, and the second one, well, it varies in terms of how like frequently the student gets it right, but generally speaking, 90% of the time that first G is correct. Okay? So you want to listen really carefully, really feel what that feels like. What could go wrong, you say? You, right? I have been accustomed to squeezing out my high notes. So on the ascending arpeggio, I'm starting to squeeze on the way up. You've got to try to remember what it feels like when you're descending and then recreate that physical experience. You, 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 you. What else could go wrong, you say? You, 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 right? Very common. The vocal folds separate, it gets really airy. These things are very common. Many of us have done them. I did them for a great many years and couldn't understand what was wrong. This is why I do what I do, to try to help you avoid what I did in the past. These exercises helped me. If you've heard me singing high notes in the songs that I write or here on the channel, it is because of these exercises. If you do them, and if you focus on how you're doing them, you can do this too. Let's try it. And you, 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 you. You, 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 you. You, 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 you. Try it on your own. And let's do it again. And let's try the altos. Now, in truth, mezzos and sopranos, you could do this too. Tenors and baritones, as your technique develops, you'll do these as well, but I would just fast forward if I were a tenor or baritone right now. And one more time. And you can also do the we thing, where you use we on the triad below the tonic at the octave, and that can help with getting those vowels nice and narrow below the secondo passaggio. You, we, 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 you, we, and altos, and And that's a beginning. I would try to set aside any expectations that this is going to result in getting those notes to be just sounding perfect above the break, above the secondo passaggio. These are exercises that will help you develop the skills to do that. They are steps along the way, and this is step 1. Kind of step 1 and 2, and I sort of mixed in steps 5 and 6 in there as well, a little bit, in order to get those triads in there. But at any rate, hopefully you get my gist. I do hope this helps. I'm excited to continue this series. If you have questions or comments, that's what the comments are for. Drop them down below. Thank you again. If you have chosen to subscribe, I truly appreciate it. And a big, big thank you to my Patreon supporters. Thank you so much for your support now and over all these years. I truly, truly appreciate it. It's also where you can get like the PDFs that I work off of for these lessons and MP3s of these practices so that you can take them wherever your travels take you. Until next time, take really good care of your voices, enjoy singing, and hopefully we'll see you again. Bye.